Hi, I'm Chase Tries Again, and I'm reviewing tabletop games now, I guess. I'm going to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition in just a minute, but I want to start very briefly by talking about what I look for in a review. First, I think star ratings, 1 through 10s, percentage grades, and other concepts are all pretty useless beyond a quick first impression, unless you're already familiar with the reviewer's work, and you are not familiar with mine. All that stuff is subjective anyway, and I'm probably not going to spend a bunch of time reviewing things I don't like. If I take the time to talk about a game, consider it a suggestion. Beyond that, opinions on things like the mechanical complexity of a game, how smooth the combat flows, etc., those are all subjective too. So what can I do to make a review useful for you? Well, first I'm going to tell you who I played with and what our preferences are when it comes to gaming, and I'm going to tell you about our session, what we played, how long it took. And at the end, I'll try to sum it up with some pros and cons. Short and simple. I'm certainly not starting any revolutions here, but I don't see this kind of analysis come across my feed often enough, and I have my own taste in terms of delivery and style. But enough about that, let's talk about games. We played Pathfinder 2nd Edition in about a 3-hour one-shot. I picked it to start with because I was excited to try it, and it was easy to access. You know about Pathfinder, but just in case someone else doesn't, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a fantasy role-playing game from Paizo that runs on a D20 system. It is, surprise surprise, the second iteration of the game, with Pathfinder 1e beginning as basically a clone of D&D 3.5. Pathfinder 2e doesn't share a direct relationship to a D&D edition, but from my reading and friends' experience, it does share some similarities to 3.5, 4th edition, and 5th edition. I'll say right here at the start, I need a lot more time to dig into this system, and I almost didn't review it because I don't want to shortchange it just for the sake of making a video, but I do think there's some value to first impressions. I played with Matt and Nick. They're both combat first players. I'm more of a roleplay guy, but we've logged a lot of hours in 5e together. They both have a broader range of experience than I do. I've got a lot more GMing and homebrewing logged, but none of us have played nearly the variety of games we'd like to. We built our level 1 characters ahead of time, and I rolled up a Kobold Cleric to play alongside them. I don't recommend GMPCs, but we had a really good experience with a sidekick in our last campaign, so we're reasonably comfortable with our handling of that. Matt played a human magus, and Nick played a catfolk witch, who was afraid of witches. I had a lot of fun building Kibbs the Kobold. There were a lot of options to choose from, but not so much that I got lost in the weeds trying to figure out what feats to take or which spells would be useful. I gather that Matt and Nick also enjoyed character creation. I really liked that stats were developed through character creation and not rolled. You start with 10s in all of your ability scores, and you take boosts and penalties to them from the different options you choose as you build your character. Rolling stats can be fun, and really sucking at things can also be fun if you're into roleplay like I am, but there's a logic to this method that helps balance the game. I also felt like the character creation process ran a lot smoother than my experience of character creation in 5e. In 5e, I often found myself flipping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and while I did have to do that a few times for Pathfinder, it wasn't nearly as time consuming. I think I could probably roll up a new character in 30 minutes or so if I wanted to. I think we also generally felt like our characters came to the table being at least kinda good at our thing, whatever that thing was. Our experience from 5e was that those first couple of levels you tend to suck and run out of options, and often not in a fun way, so this was refreshing. I know my cleric was a really bomb healer. He was well equipped for the job and had enough juice to get the party through 3 combat encounters. Matt and Nick did not have quite as glorious a session as Kibbs the Kobold, but that brings me to my next point. I built our one-shot. This may not have been my best idea, but the official one-shots I had to hand weren't thrilling me, and most of them were also balanced for more characters than we had. And coming from 5e, I just didn't feel comfortable trying to rebalance encounters from published material. If I've got to do that, I'd just assume start from scratch. But once I got into the details, my impression was that encounter creation was much more streamlined and easy to grasp. Then when we played, I thought I must have been mistaken, and then I realized I'd screwed up. So let's break this down a bit. I'll put our encounters up on the screen. There were technically 4 of them. The party snuck by the skeletons at the beginning. Jiraj the Magus fell in a pit trap after that, but Kibbs patched him up. Then they wrecked the pair of orcs in the hallway, and that's where I fumbled the ball. Those 2 orc brutes were really easy, I thought, so I just slapped another one on the next encounter. We almost died fighting the second set of orcs. There may have been some fudging on my part to get us out of that encounter alive. I realized after the fact that I had not been running the brutes to their full potential. I totally forgot about their ferocity, and I really just ran them as melee attack machines rather than utilizing other action options. This put us in a bad spot in the second orc encounter because while they weren't actually being used to their fullest potential, the warrior's extra power, plus the action economy and some swingy dice rolls combined to make things much harder than intended. I think I could have taken the skeleton out of that final encounter and it still would have been a suitable boss encounter. I don't think it was too bad as is, but our characters were almost tapped out and we were a little fatigued after the orcs. The session ended with Dunkles the Witch chasing the drow out into the hallway and beating him with a quarterstaff. My takeaway is that the official rules for designing encounters are actually really good, but if, like me, you're used to 5e, you need to do a much closer read of your monsters than you may be used to for low levels. I also think there may be less wiggle room and encounter design, broadly speaking, but I can't really say for sure until I've got a lot more playtime under my belt. I really liked hazards, Pathfinder's traps. They were very thoroughly designed and the guidance for using them was clear. Generally, I think skills in Pathfinder 2e are a lot more rigorously implemented than in 5e D&D. They feel just as deep as combat and more interwoven with the other systems in the game. Skills have levels of expertise ranging from untrained to legendary, and as you progress in some skills, you get better at using it, your modifier goes up, and you unlock more challenging but more powerful uses. For example, if you're trained in medicine, you can use Treat Wounds. Initially, the DC to treat wounds is 15, it takes 10 minutes, and if you succeed, you heal the person 2d8. As you progress in the skill, you have the option to roll against higher DCs and do more healing. I really appreciate how thorough this skill system is. I think it feels better to have these precise use cases laid out. On the flip side, it can be a little overwhelming when you're used to leaning mostly on your own judgment like I am. I found myself referring to the GM screen, the core rulebook, and Archive of Nethys a lot, and that brings me around to my last area of discussion. There are a lot of resources available for Pathfinder 2e. Paizo has published quite a bit, and there are 2 websites. Archive of Nethys is a fan-run site officially partnered with Paizo that houses most, if not all, of the rules. There's also the official Pathfinder Nexus, which has a character builder in the works. The core rulebook can be a bit intimidating, but Archive of Nethys has a great player intro that I'll link down below. Generally, though, I like the layout of these books a lot. The Pathfinder bestiaries have just about everything I would look for in terms of organization. One minor quibble is that monster stat blocks are sometimes broken across pages. This isn't really a problem for me because I'm using PDFs anyway, but I could see it being confusing in a physical book. There are also some odds and ends in the stat blocks, like ferocity, that I wish got re-explained or at least had a page number beside them. I don't like flipping pages, but if I've got to, I'd at least like to know exactly where to go. I'm going to have to make my own GM screen before I play again. There's an awful lot to remember, and I found that their admittedly very thorough GM screen didn't always have what I was looking for, and I really don't like cracking open tomes to do a bit of light reading in the middle of a game. I will also say I have a physical copy of the Game Mastery Guide, and as someone who usually prefers hard copies, I'm finding that I prefer Paizo's releases in PDF format. Something about it just makes it flow better for me. I had a good time, and I liked Pathfinder 2e well enough that I intend to do a campaign using it at some point in the future. I really think this may become our fantasy system of choice for a while. Pathfinder 2e had been billed to me, in some spaces anyway, as kind of revolutionary. I don't think I'd go that far. Matt says the same. But it was a solid play experience, and I can see lots of potential in it. One thing I didn't mention earlier is the action economy. We're still getting used to it, me especially, but it does feel like a refinement with fewer opportunities for turns to feel like total duds. I think the system has a lot going for it. Lots of options for character creation, and you get benefits from your class early. Lots of material from Paizo and easy-to-access rules on Archive of Nethys. Beefy bestiaries with monsters that have some satisfying crunch to them, and lots of support for players and GM alike when it comes to how to use all those myriad options they're throwing your way. The main downside, and it can be a big one for some folks, all those rules that make decision-making a little cleaner are also a lot to remember. This is a system that definitely benefits from doing your homework. There are also a lot more options for players, and if you're a GM who likes to be at least broadly familiar with each player's abilities, that's going to add a lot of reading to your plate. Also, it is, even without my operator error, a bit difficult to balance for parties with fewer than 4 players. Not impossible, and that's not exactly an unusual problem, but it does take some extra thought. And this one is more a matter of preference than something baked into the rules, but I felt less comfortable winging it than I do in 5e. The rule set here feels so much more thorough that in a lot of cases I feel like I'd be shortchanging the players if I didn't double check a ruling. That's certainly something I could see going away once I'm more familiar with the system though. So that's it, Pathfinder 2e. If you'd like something in the same vein as D&D, but with a little more mechanical heft to it, this is a good game to try. I've heard a lot of good things about the beginner's box, and I think I'll be picking that up soon, hopefully from a friendly local gaming store. Next time, we're playing The Quiet Year by Avery Alder, which should be a fun, very different experience. I'm Chase Tries Again. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do the social things if you want to. Until next time.